give you more knuckle.
Hello guys and welcome to If Life Were an Anime. Today I bring you a list of 5 boxers who could be anime MCs. So boxing and anime are two things that I love and I think they mix very well. There are very good boxing animes as well, like Ashira no Joe, Hajime no Ippo, Megalobox. So I had to make this list because the parallels of shonen anime and boxing, they're so intertwined. There are so many things they have in common. They're both filled with drama, training arcs, tournament arcs, and fighting. Boxing and anime for me simply go very well together. The skill some of these guys possess literally looks like skills from an anime. It looks unreal. It's like they tapped into Ultra Instinct even before it was known as Ultra Instinct. You have guys like that are defensive masters that make their opponents look ridiculous, or guys with an offensive power that is simply scary and out of this world. So without further ado, here are the top 5 boxers that could have their own anime. The criteria is not only boxing skills, but also life filled with unsurmountable amounts of difficulties and challenges. The more the drama, the better the story. So at number 1, Mike Tyson. A young Mike Tyson was raised in the hood. He was 10 years old when he moved to the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. Apparently, the city was affected by crime and banned substances, which also took a toll on young Tyson's life. As a young black kid, overweight, with a high-toned voice and a lisp, he was abandoned to his luck. Young Tyson couldn't have it any harder, even if he tried. His mother was a lady of the night, often neglecting Tyson and his sister. Tyson grew up bullied, even being victim of sexual abuse at a young age. But everything would change for this young man when all the rage and anger pent up inside him would explode abruptly and spare him from being a victim ever again. When Tyson was around 12 years old, he was walking while holding his favorite pigeon. It was his favorite pet and his only true friend. Tyson had picked up a love for pigeon raising when he was walking around through the many different roofs of the abandoned buildings of New York City with other older kids. That fateful day, one of Tyson's bullies saw Big Fat Tyson strangely happy and enjoying his day with said pigeon, and the bully thought such a rare event must be put to an end immediately, as Mike's happiness seemed almost to hurt his sensibilities. So he snatched the pigeon from Tyson's hands and with swift cruelty twisted its neck in front of young Mike while laughing and taking pride in such a perfect execution of viciousness and cruelty. Young Mike, almost as acting out of character, was overcome with a murderous rage and swung against his bully, his fist carrying righteousness and vengeance like God's judgment. The blow landed with a thunderous thud in the bully's face, separating him from consciousness faster than the morning light vanishes the feeble shadows of dawn. From that day on, young Mike would be recognized as a fighter and a force to be respected in the neighborhood. But undirected violence would not be the positive factor in Mike's life for a long time, as his juvenile delinquent habits would land him in a reformatory in upstate New York. But this seemingly negative fact would turn out to be his meeting with fate, as Mike would be introduced by a prison guard to a man named Cos D'Amato, an old boxing trainer and amateur psychologist, who when first put eyes on Mike, knew from that moment he would shape Tyson and his fiery temper into a roaring blaze and make him the youngest heavyweight champion in history.
Forget poverty. I don't care how much money you get or fame. Forget that. Poverty hurts and leave an everlasting impression on you.
At number 2, we have Roberto Duran. The hard streets of Panama City in the 50s raised violent children, just like the middle-class American suburbs raised gamers. For Roberto Duran, the story is the same. Fatherless and poor, thrown into the concrete jungle with nothing but his fist to protect him. Roberto's story takes its most interesting turn after he achieves glory and fame, when he beat Sugar Ray Leonard, America's golden boy, to become the world lightweight champion. At this point, he was at the top of the world and felt invincible. During the following months, Roberto gave himself wholeheartedly to excess in food, drinks, and women, while Leonard planned his revenge in the dark. Leonard's team, hearing Duran was out of shape and not training at all, offered a quick rematch, and Duran's team accepted. On the night of the fight, Duran committed fighting's greatest sin. After suffering for most of the fight and feeling not at his best physical condition due to his lack of discipline previous to the fight, Duran got tired of the punishment, turned his back on Leonard, and quit the fight. "No más," he said, and these words would forever mark him and make him the infamous creator of one of boxing's history most shameful moments. Because in the business of boxing, getting knocked out, getting stopped, having your team throw the towel are seen as defeats and losses, but they aren't viewed as especially dishonorable. They are part of the trade. However, because Duran quit of his own volition mid-fight and turned his back and openly said, "No more," this turned the hero of Panama and the destroyer of America's golden boy into the most abject coward. Returning home, Duran, accustomed to a multitude of fans and admirers, was in disbelief when there wasn't a single soul at the airport in his welcome. And in his everyday life, he was met with unusual looks of disapproval by his own people, who had previously adored him. Duran's macho mentality and pride could not endure the shame. He hid himself for a time, and then one clear determination arose in his heart. Abandoned by all except his mother, he swore to himself to find redemption in fighting again. No matter how big his opponent, no matter how much of an underdog he was, he would take all fights, and he would die 1,000 times before ever quitting again. That was the vow that Duran made to himself, and he began his road to redemption by taking on the most feared fighters of all the divisions above his. Duran, a natural lightweight and with a height of 5'7", that is 170 centimeters, took on the likes of 6'1" welterweight Thomas the Hitman Hearns, suffering a thunderous knockout defeat. Same story when he challenged professional man-beater Marvelous Marvin Hagler, a challenge so difficult even Sugar Ray Leonard, his old nemesis, had refused. And Leonard would only face Hagler 5 years after Duran had, when Hagler was less dangerous and much older in fighting years. But Duran's greatest challenge was when he challenged middleweight ferocious giant in 6'1", 220 pounds behemoth Aaron Barkley. Barkley had made quick work of Thomas Hearns, and Hearns himself had outclassed Duran savagely. How and if former lightweight Duran could even stand around with middleweight and soon to be light heavyweight Barkley was unimaginable. But Duran showed up to the fight determined to make a statement. Roberto took a beating at the hands of Barkley, but was still in the fight. Something that science will never be able to explain. How this 5'7" kid was able to hold his own against Barkley and kept on going, we don't know, but it was a masterclass of skill and much more of heart. Perhaps in Duran's mind, this war, this punishment, and the rivers of blood he was shedding were his atonement for no más. Only the pain and the relentless will to march forward in the face of unconquerable adversity would once and for all erase his past shame. On that night of February the 24th, 1989, Duran would knock down Barkley and make his way into a split decision victory over the man who had terrorized the middleweights and welterweights of his era, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest boxers of all time and a man who would never again surrender. At number 3, we have Bernard Hopkins, the man who would become known as middleweight most dominant champion and boxing's longest reigning middleweight, the old sage. Bernard Hopkins would not have it easy in his way to the title and out of a life of danger and crime. Bernard Hopkins was born in January 15, 1965 in Philadelphia, the city of fighters. He grew up in perhaps the most crime-ridden projects in Philly. By the time he was 11, he was already into petty theft. Within 2 years, he was mugging people and had been to the emergency room 3 times with stab wounds. He joined a gang and graduated to higher crimes. By the age of 18, he had accumulated a rap sheet longer than his left arm. In 1982, after racking up 9 felonies, he was sent to Great Fort Prison and sentenced to 18 years. Prison was hell for young Hopkins, filled with other impatient and vicious men, constantly trying to prey on each other, constantly seeking for victims, and tragedy would strike also outside prison, as Hopkins' brother would be murdered, leaving his old and poor mother to her own luck and without any support from his only son. When he was taken to recognize the body of his brother by the police, Hopkins saw the look on his mother's eyes, a look that he would never forget and would use as a motivator to finally turn his life around. As he once told a reporter from Philadelphia Daily News, "I saw worse stuff inside prison than I ever saw in the streets. I saw guys raped, beaten, and tortured. When I saw a guy murdered for a lousy pack of cigarettes, something in me snapped. I knew that I had to be responsible for my own life." Around his 21st birthday, Hopkins discovered boxing. There were no referees in prison, no weight classes, no mercy. Challenges could not be refused, as saying no to a challenge was taken as a public announcement of cowardice and would make you a target of other inmates. Hopkins sharpened his boxing skills in this living tomb of men, surrounded by killers and shrewd beasts in the form of humans. Daily survival was his only goal, and the ruthless execution of his opponents with his fists his only option. Only a few make it out of the prison system, and even fewer manage to stay out of it. Yet Hopkins would use his time wisely, graduating high school while incarcerated and also becoming inter-prison champion. Hopkins served 5 years of his sentence and was released on good behavior. He turned pro and survived doing odd jobs to sustain himself. But his road to success was not smooth. He lost his first professional fight, but picking himself up from the ruins of his swiftly trampled dream, he managed to keep hope and took to fighting again. This time, winning. After his second fight, Hopkins amassed 21 consecutive victories, marking the beginning of one of boxing's most dominant reigns. And instead of the prison uniform and the metaphorical chains of shame and crime, Hopkins would wrap around his waist the coveted gold belt of a world champion. Finally, free at last. At number 4, we have Muhammad Ali. Born Cassius Marcellus Clay, January 17, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky, United States. Muhammad was an odd case for a boxer. His family was relatively well off for a black family during that time, and Cassius was smart. He had no economical motivation to become a boxer, so him being able to achieve what he did is even more amazing, as often people who don't have to box don't box at all. Since having a good-looking face disfigured and risking injury and death are not appealing options for someone with, well, any other option. But Ali had a talent for fighting, and the focus of our attention will be on his biggest and scariest opponent, the United States government. As Muhammad Ali was already a champion, in 1966 he was drafted into the army. Ali refused to serve on the basis of a moral objection to the war in Vietnam. The government assured him that he would not do any real fighting and would simply be used as a propaganda tool to uplift the troops' morale. But Ali's conviction on the unjust military invasion of the United States into Vietnam kept him true to his values, and he sternly refused to cooperate or being drafted even in the most comfortable of circumstances.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some darker people or some pro-hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I go shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? Just take me to jail.
Ali more than held his own against students who had a far better formal education than he.
I'm saying you talking about me about some draft, and all of you white boys are breaking your neck to get to Switzerland and Canada and London. I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemies are white people, not Viet Congs or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
Yet Ali's anti-war posture deprived him of all the benefits of being a world champion. But this vile punishment given to him by the authorities would not sway him into going back on his word or his values, for he found in himself the dignity and courage to say no to a vicious system of war and racism, and to stand firm against the biggest and most violent repressive state of earth, the corporate war machine of the United States of America. And for this very reason, for standing up and sacrificing everything he had for his ideas and for the millions of innocent people who were the victims of war all over the world, is that Muhammad Ali transcended boxing. He was no longer just a sportsman, and it would matter very little after that how many fights he won, how many he lost. Whenever Ali went, he was idolized by the very same people for whom he took a stand, the poor, the downtrodden, the forgotten and ignored. For Ali would forever be seen as a champion of the people. At number 5, we have George Foreman. Unlike Ali, Foreman was not handsome, he was not quick-witted or loved by the fans, but he had power unmatched in the entire history of boxing, and to be considered one of the most powerful punchers to ever live in a sport filled with tremendous punchers is not a small feat. Foreman's most important victory starts from utter defeat and oblivion. After suffering the biggest defeat of his career at the hands of Ali, Foreman had a couple of more fights after and then retired from boxing completely, sick to his stomach of the fighting game. From defeat, shame, guilt, and regret. From here is where the most unusual and impressive comeback in boxing history starts. At age 40, and 10 years after his best days were already over, when for all boxing experts a boxer is as good as dead athletically speaking, Foreman went against the common wisdom and the advice of all his family and friends and set out to make a comeback and become champion of the world again. In his autobiography, he wrote that his primary motivation was to raise money to fund the youth center he had created, which had required much of the money he had earned in the initial phase of his career. Was this a gimmick? Was he serious? Most of the press thought Foreman was insane and would be utterly demolished by the younger, more lenient fighters. But Big George had found one thing he lacked in his previous time as a fighter: the capacity to believe in yourself even when all men doubt you. This maybe was something he learned from being around Ali so many years ago, and a lesson picked up from the bitterness of defeat. George had no speed left, no agility, no stamina. He was fat, he was old. He looked more like a sumo wrestler than a boxer. But there was something he had left, something that for heavyweight boxers is the last thing to go with age: raw power. With this weapon, Foreman started his road back to title contention, to teach the people that life is not over at 40. And this time, the Foreman who was rejected and abandoned for a much more charismatic and handsome Ali was now being embraced by the fans who saw in him not the formidable, ruthless champion, but the old and hopeful underdog who against all odds decides to attempt the impossible. Amassing 9 soul-pricing wins in his comeback, Foreman was finally given a title shot against undisputed heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield, who was in tremendous shape at 208 pounds. Very few boxing experts gave the 42-year-old Foreman a chance of winning. Foreman, who weighed in at 257 pounds, began the contest by marching forward, absorbing several of Holyfield's best combinations, and occasionally landing a powerful swing of his own. Holyfield proved too tough and agile to knock down, and Foreman lost the fight. This defeat would not dishearten George. He had stood his ground against the most dangerous heavyweight of the era, and though he wasn't able to win, for a 40-year-old retired preacher, this was some serious achievement. Doubters were beginning to become believers. Would Foreman be able to actually become champion? In 1994, Foreman again sought to challenge for the World Championship after Michael Moorer had beaten Holyfield for the IBF and WBA titles. Having lost his last fight against Morrison, Foreman, unranked and in no position to demand another title shot. His relatively high profile, however, made a title shot against Moorer happen, since it was a lucrative prospect and little risk for the 19-year-old champion. Foreman's title challenge against Moorer took place on November 5th in Las Vegas, Nevada, with Foreman wearing the same red trunks he had worn in his title loss to Ali 20 years earlier. This time, however, Foreman was a substantial underdog. For 9 rounds, Moorer easily outboxed him, hitting and moving away, while Foreman marched forward, seemingly unable to pull the trigger on his punches. However, he launched a comeback in the 10th round and hit Moorer with a devastating right hand that carried 250 pounds of force and hope from an old man. The punch caught Moorer in the chin, and he collapsed into a loving embrace of the ground beneath his feet. George Foreman did the impossible and became the oldest heavyweight champion in history, finally free of the demons who had haunted him for 20 years since his defeat to Ali in Zaire. Foreman had regained the title he lost to Ali 2 decades before. He went back to his corner and knelt in prayer as the arena erupted in cheers. With the historic victory, Foreman broke 3 records. He became at age 45 the oldest fighter to ever win a world championship, 20 years after losing his title for the first time. He broke the record for the fighter with the longest interval between his first and second world championships, and the age spread of 19 years between the champion and challenger was the largest of any heavyweight boxing championship fight. Big George would become a spokesman for a grill, later known as the George Foreman Grill, a deal that would also turn him into a millionaire. And once hated George Foreman would shed the past that so heavy had weighted him down for many years and become what he always wanted to be, a champion loved by the people. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I love boxing and anime, and doing this video was so fun for me. Please like and subscribe for more. Take care.